of vehicles just like this, chock full of police, some in riot gear, and it was quite an astonishing. They were going, and you know where they were headed to, a protest yesterday. But it really, they're swift and sure as they move into position, and often, as we witnessed yesterday, it was in response to a protest. This could very well be more as a deterrent. And if you will, a way of stopping the protesters from going into an area that they would prefer that they didn't. There we have a live shot of police in riot gear.
Well, I mean, there's about, I counted about 15 vans going past.
It's about what I saw yesterday, yeah.
Yeah, going through there, in addition to the riot squad officers that are positioned here at this intersection, and they're guarding the intersections to ensure the protesters do not go southbound towards that fence. And now add to those 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, you'll see come into your view here. More vans with police officers on the move. And
you know, anyone trying to rent a van this weekend knew that they couldn't, and this is why police scooped up just about everything they could in order to transport the sheer high number of police officers. We also saw EMS trucks ready, you know, mobile hospitals. Let's listen in. You're watching Toronto's breaking news, CP24, a live look from just about every angle of the thousands of protesters who started at Queen's Park, made their way along Queen Street after going down University, and they're just outside our backyard right here at 299 Queen Street West. From high atop this building, Farah Nasser, what can you tell us?
Well, Anne, we just saw Amnesty International and a contingent from Amnesty, and they had a coffin that they were holding among the protesters. But what I really wanted to tell you about was just maybe 10 minutes ago, we saw dozens of rioters in their, or protesters, I should say. It looked like they were wearing all black. They had bandanas covering their mouths, and they literally ran through the crowd and swerving in and around of different groups like the CAW and other groups that we saw. And I'm not sure where they were headed. They were followed by just as many members of the media with cameras, video cameras, literally, as I said, running through the crowd and just swerving around people. And again, I'm not sure where they were headed. I just wanted to let you know about that because we did see it from here up on the balcony. Also, police in riot gear surrounding our building on a lot of side streets around here that you guys probably can't see from your angle, but it looks like the police really have us covered in case anything were to happen right over here.
You know, I'm a part of this, but I'm also watching it very closely, and you know, it's not lost on any of us that CTV and CP24, a whole lot of other stations take the weekend off, not us. We are there giving you the best perspective of history in the making during this G20. We are at every angle we can be, and keeping our distance to let history unfold as we're looking at live pictures on the streets of our downtown core, Queen Street West, a labor union group and others coming together for what appears to be so far a peaceful protest. I want to bring Stephanie Smythe in right now, Farah. Thank you for that. And Stephanie, we, through Sue Scambatti's cameras, got a real look at the police side of this and the preparations underway, and they have lined up in the Peter and Richmond area in riot gear. Tell us more.
Well, what I can tell you, well, we see the police in the riot gear. From our own cameras, you could see a woman pushing a stroller in this protest, Anne. So, you know, they're at the ready, but so far, everything is very peaceful at Queen and University and along University Avenue. We know that the steelworkers in the CAW passed a short time ago, and chants of hey, hey, ho, ho, Stephen Harper's got to go, and an older woman, maybe in her 70s, walking alone, saying spend money on the people who need it, not the fat politicians. So it's just, I think what we're seeing is just a large demonstration of peaceful protesters and the police there at the ready should they have to step in. But right now, we're all happy to report things look under control, though the massive crowd is a bit daunting. Over 4,000.
It is incredible. And, you know, it's interesting you talked about what some of the chants are and their criticism about Stephen Harper, but it isn't just Canada and our leader who's being criticized. We've got Shame, Shame USA, Barack Obama, and also the economy, the environmental oil spill. Here's another live shot, Steph, of our very well-trained police officers, and there are thousands of them who have been put into position here, and in this particular case, hundreds in riot gear, and there's so far no sign of any protesters breaking away, but as you say, the police are they're at the ready.
Absolutely, Anne, and I know that we also have been following at the back end of this protest, and CP24 special correspondent Craig Kielberger is keeping an eye on that for us, and no reports of any problem at the back end. So it's just, and we do have Craig. Now let's go and see how things are going from your perspective, Craig. It's absolutely massive here. The demonstration we can see turning onto Queen Street. You're still on University, I take it.
We are indeed. We've been jumping at various points throughout this protest, trying to get a view from the back, the middle, the U.S. consulate, Queen Street, but especially at this point, getting the idea of at the back where it is peaceful. It really is a celebration. Interesting chants. They range from resist, resist, raise up your fists. Some people are taking photos of the police officers, some, you know, in a very menacing way, some literally posing with them. You know, we talked to Greg Cooper. He's marching with the CAW. We asked why he was marching. He said the G20 is not working. It hasn't been working for many years. He said if I had 5 minutes, I'd tell them they need to renew their efforts. Profits should go to the many, not to the few. Amnesty signs are here saying eliminate poverty, demand dignity. They're chanting, what do we want? Human rights. When do we want them? Now. We see kids on shoulders, a lot of musical instruments. There's actually small marching bands at the moment. There's a drum circle with people dancing in the middle. It's really eclectic. You mentioned those Harper-related chants. One of the most common ones I've been hearing is, hey, hey, ho, ho, Stephen Harper's gotta go. And that one's caught at various points along the crowd. There's one woman, 70-year-old, spoke to and said the money for the G20 should be spent on people, and as she phrased it, not fat cats. Really an interesting collection of messages. The steelworkers chanting no scabs, no problems. Greenpeace chanting, when I say climate, you say justice. When I say climate, you say justice. There's a collection here of students who have led a chant, not in our name, not with our money. It's an incredibly eclectic group. My favorite of all so far is a protester who's here and he's wearing a t-shirt saying, getting my $1 billion worth. And a lot of people have been posing for pictures with this particular protester.
I'm still amazed to hear about all the children in the protest, even though Toronto police were advising against it. People bringing out children, as you say, on shoulders and in strollers we see going along Queen Street. It's amazing. And that juxtaposed to Anne, as we're learning, there's a massive police staging right now, Sue Scambatti telling us, on Richmond Street, west of Peter, Anne, and these are riot squad officers.
Now I'm watching as the protest goes by here, our own backyard, 299 Queen Street West. Please look over my shoulder with you, and I'll try to actually kind of move out of the way. One sign, bring Omar Khadr back to Canada. Stephanie, we just saw a tweet that said, I'm watching live coverage on CP24 of this protest, and it says, close as you can get to being there. So your best seat in the house, that is for sure. The protesters continue along Queen Street West, and Stephanie, it started out strong, then the numbers waned a bit, and now it is thick and full of people, and so far, it is peaceful at this point. And as Craig Kielberger told us and has given us some brilliant interviews with people, they have real messages for the leaders and for the world watching what's going on right now. And I think it's not lost on anyone that a peaceful protest might be a greater way to open ears. Let's go live, all eyes and ears, to Farah Nasser up at the top of our building. Farah, what are you hearing?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Farah, are you there? We don't have Farah at this point, but we're going to manage to get her. Stephanie Smythe,
and
now we have a shot of...
those are called Black Bloc protesters.
Yes.
Walking by our cameras right now, or cameras on Queen Street. So they're heading by our station just about now and heading west on Queen Street. And, you know, it's a peaceful protest, but there is a problem with this. There's some traffic delays. And this is affecting even news crews getting in and around town. Some of our own camera crews are having trouble navigating their way to the station. Some stuck at Queen University right now.
And if you said to them, try to take the subway, no such luck. We've got subway shut down right now, south of Bloor on both University and the Yonge lines, no shuttle bus service. So it's a little tough to get around, and interesting that our crews are not able to get to the spots that they might like to be able to. But I'll tell you, these are, as that tweet said, somebody on Twitter saying this is as close as you can possibly get without actually being there. That's what we're all about. And of course, CP24 never takes a break. Other stations take the weekend off. We are here. We are bringing you live pictures of what is so far a peaceful labor union and other groups protest through the streets of Toronto. But as you very astutely pointed out, Steph, traffic chaos and no subway service at this point. Adam Giambrone putting safety first, shutting down the University and Yonge lines south of Bloor for the moment, and we'll let you know the minute they reopen. Steph?
And Anne, we're learning, Adam Giambrone says now Spadina streetcars are affected by this, so they are not in service. And also we're learning that no-go service to Union Station right now. I don't know if that's from the west or the east or both. Katie Simpson, is that?
No-go service to Union, no.
Okay, now we're looking at some shots now of protesters going down John Street, and that is on the west side of our building. You can see our satellites dishes on the top of our building there, and you can see that they're gathering or maybe being delayed by some police there, but they're you know, just last weekend, this was where the red carpet was.
Yep, exactly. Can you imagine? Like I said, what a difference a week makes. Now, it's a very strong, tight line of police officers. If you look about the center of your screen now, slightly to the left, as we're turning around, it's a little harder to detail that, but you can see a long line of black uniforms on the left side. Those are the police stopping the protesters
and they're
from
pushing
heading
them back
south.
in. Can you see that on the left?
Yes, so let's watch this right now for a moment.
Those are riot police in riot gear, and look at that being hurled at police right now.
So why don't we, items are being thrown at police. It looks like the poles holding the flags. Farah, what can you see?
Okay, things are being tossed there, Anne.
I'm looking at it on our screen. We're not seeing this this vantage point right now. We're just seeing the protest go in. So you guys go ahead, explain what's happening.
Okay, so you know, we'll take it back then, Steph. We're watching here live. It was anticipated that some protesters were going to break free from the route and head south, and they have. Police have lined a very tight line of police officers in riot gear, attempting to hold the crowd back. We're going to watch, Steph.
Calling you 88. 88.
It's happening right there. We can see it.
We are listening in and looking at a group of people, and quite a substantial number of people have turned left south onto John Street. There's a corner of Queen and John, our home. We're looking from various perspectives as police are, as they had suggested they would very strongly, they are standing shoulder to shoulder in riot gear, and they are attempting to hold the crowd back, not necessarily push them back yet, but
they're
hold
holding
the
line. That's
they're
exactly. They're holding the line.
They're not at this point. And again, we're just watching and waiting.
It's interesting there's no mounted units here, and they might be on the way. We know that they were around yesterday for the protest along University.
And you had described a particular group that was dressed in black, of protesters. It appears to me, and again, this is a very high perspective, but they might be at the front of the protest line, the ones facing the police.
They're called the Black Bloc protesters, Anne, and I guess they might be considered the anarchists and not part of the typical labor protest group. And I can't say much more about the group other than that we're aware of them, and they are very distinguished in that crowd with how they're dressed, obviously in the black, and now this confrontation with the riot police right on John Street, just outside on the west side of our building at Queen and John.
We saw some things being hurled that went on briefly, several items. Now we're literally at a standstill.
It appears they're having some luck pushing the crowd back onto Queen Street.
Now they are moving, yeah.
And look, there's
still some things being thrown.
I think those are flags.
I believe they are.
Being tossed at the riot police, and they're very much moving forward with their shields.
And that is the intersection. That's the spot that we normally cross, John Street, to go from the east side of Queen to the west side of Queen. And this to the east side of John to the west side of John.
And things still being hurled from that crowd and at police. And it was happening yesterday, too. I know Craig Kielberger, our special correspondent, was telling me that they won't hesitate to throw anything at police. Some groups have no problem tossing things at police, so can you blame them for being prepared for that eventuality?
Now,
and
there's more things being tossed. And Stephanie, that line is very strong of police in riot gear, but the gap between the protesters facing them and the police has widened.
But they're holding. Nobody's moving. That's the thing. They're back onto Queen Street. This is a live shot from a rooftop camera at 299 Queen down onto Queen and John. As I was saying, that was the big stage at the MMVAs last weekend, and now it's a whole other stage and drama being played out.
And it seems to be a sea of dark clothing in the center of that protest group. And you had pointed out you're very observant, a particular group.
We did see shots of some of those protesters cutting through the line on University Avenue and earlier getting south of Queen. You know how the police had that big blockade and they shifted westbound onto Queen, but some did get through down on University. Not a large group, but we're keeping an eye on that situation as well.
So this is the situation as it stands right now. This is the corner of Queen and John. The full intersection is blocked by thousands of protesters. What began as a labor union protest has been joined by many, many different groups. Some road groups, perhaps, fringe groups as well. The route was not to go south of Queen Street, but there had been a threat that some might break away and try to reach the fence, the security fence. Police well aware of the movement, and this is what we see right now, Stephanie Smythe. Police have lined John Street from east to west, tight as can be. They have managed to move the protesters back up into the intersection of Queen Street and John, and that's where we are right now.
And I know that from our reporters in the field, Lisa Laflamme with CTV is telling us that as we can see, thousands congregated here at 299 Queen at the corner of Queen and John, but police have put their tear gas masks on, some of them. Now, what we know from what the Integrated Security Unit told us, what the Chief, Bill Blair, has told us about anything to do with tear gas, it will only be fired if it is at all after several warnings.
It's incredible. This is happening right here at our home at 299 Queen Street West. A standoff, it appears, between police and, or maybe we say a standstill at this point. So the protesters aren't going anywhere. It's almost a calm, and let's hope it's the calm before the calm. Police shoulder to shoulder with backup behind them, and we're just waiting to see where the next move, who it comes from, and what it is.
And we saw those riot police move from an earlier location, just south of there, and anticipating John Street to be the target mark for the protesters to head south.
Now, it appears, Steph, that some of the protesters are beginning to move slightly to the west. We still have that central group in dark clothing, not moving, but the ones who've been around them appear, Stephanie, to be moving slightly to the west.
Okay, so what is the next move? Hopefully they'll just continue on in and hit Spadina and go north and go back to Queen's Park and the intended peaceful demonstration by the thousands, hundreds of labor organizers and demonstrators hoping for a peaceful demonstration of their cause will continue and all will be okay. That was the worst of it that we've seen just yet, Ann.
And we are watching. We are not going to leave these particular shots as view of what's going on. And take a look, Stephanie, as we sort of look toward the east of...
And here we have more
just hearing
riot
from
police.
our producer that we've got more riot police coming in. They're walking very calmly. They don't. Some of them have their faces covered. Others do not. They are moving in very calmly.
And I can tell you that while this unfolds, we still do not have subway service from St. George to Bloor. and no bus or streetcar service between Broadview and Spadina southbound from Bloor. We know that there aren't any shuttle buses or anything at this point. This was part of the TTC's plan.
Yep, and this was something that they have worked on. It was all the preparations for all of the various modes of transportation in this city, and it's safety first. And Adam Giambroni told us live here on CP24 just a couple of hours ago that this was the plan if necessary. And right now, no subway service south of Bloor on the University and the Young Line. Let's go live to Farah Nasser on the phone. Farah, what can you tell us?
Guys, I'm sitting at a 5th floor office, and I'm looking down because I have probably the best view here. It's right at John and Queen, and you can see the media is to the side. Everyone's filming this. Everyone's looking at this very, very closely. And I know we were thinking that it was the group that was dressed in black that was at the front, but that's not the case. There's several different protesters, it looks like, from different groups with their signs. Now, I can also tell you that police have taken away flagpoles and umbrellas from some of the protesters. I don't know if that's out of fear of them throwing these items at police. But again, you mentioned that a lot of people are heading west on Queen, and that's exactly what's happening right now.
So Farah, there is still a group, if you can give us your perspective from that bird's eye view, is there still a group facing police and that line that police have formed right across? And have you any idea the nature of the group at this point?
No, it looks, and to me, like it's just a mixture of different people that are just standing. Actually, at the front, there's quite a few media cameras that are taking pictures of this police line, and the protesters behind seem to be dispersing. So whatever this was, whatever tension this was, it looks like it's dissipating from the angle that I have. And again, the front line you see there of all the people is mostly media crews and cameras.
Interesting. All right, Farah Nasser, thank you for clarifying that. Stephanie Smythe, we continue to watch this. There still is a large portion of this group of protesters standing absolutely still right here at our home at 299 Queen Street West.
Just to give you a little bit of background, Anne, on the Black Bloc, which is part of the group that we're seeing, and it is indeed, there's this a tactic for protests and marches where the individuals wear black clothing, they wear scarves,
and they hide their faces, and they
motorcycle helmets with padding or other face-concealing items, and often carry some sort of shield. And the clothing is used to avoid being identified, so to theoretically appear as one large mass, which you were noting, Anne, from our cameras from above, promoting solidarity or creating a clear revolutionary presence. That's the Black Bloc.
Now here's another look at our home, 299 Queen West, and we're looking as police in a very orderly fashion are, they have arrived on scene, this particular group, to add to the contingent. Where are we going now? I'm just hearing that we're going to another shot. So once again, the protesters, a bit of a log jam at Queen and John, where some protesters, we did see this live, Stephanie, some protesters did throw some items at police. It looked as if for a flag or two, police shoulder to shoulder, a very tight line. They were able to move the protesters back up into the intersection of Queen and John, and it appears that some of the protesters are moving west. Others are standing still, facing police.
And I'm just getting this update. At the request of Toronto Police, GO Transit is now having all Lakeshore Line trains terminating at Danforth GO Station on the East Line and Exhibition GO Station on the Lakeshore West Line. Passengers have the option to return to their station outside of the law enforcement's secured downtown zone. They say this is a temporary measure. And we will notify of any changes. So again, disruptions now on GO train service, Lakeshore East and West lines affected at the request of Toronto Police. GO Transit now having all Lakeshore trains terminating at Danforth Station on the East Line and at Exhibition GO Station on the Lakeshore West Line.
Let's go up to the top of our building, Stephanie, and we've got Farah Nasser on the line. Farah, what's happening now?
Well, there's so many more police officers, and they're just 2 by 2. There's police that are holding shields in front of them with helmets. There's another group of police officers with different colored helmets. Also, as I can see, yes, holding shields in front of them. They look like all types of different officers, as I mentioned. And then you have about 40 that are just, manning this line here and are just behind this line as well. So
give us some perspective.
Clearly doubled in police presence, probably even maybe more than that.
So they have been walking in an orderly fashion north on John. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In almost in a T formation, if you will, with the police line across John Street, and then we see the additional police in a very calm manner approaching the situation, walking up John Street, and obviously, and I'll bring Stephanie back in on this one as well, you're not going anywhere if you're in the downtown core. Stay with us on CP24 because we're going to give you everything you need to see and everything as it unfolds without having to be caught in traffic, a lack of transportation, transit-wise, as this protest stalls at our home at Queen and John, Steph.
Well, Anne, I'm just learning more from CTV's Lisa Laflamme, who is out in the thick of it, that 30 more Black Bloc group members just joined in here, 30 more jumping in from an alley off Queen Street coming up to Spadina, Anne, and thus, I gather that's why we're seeing this riot reinforcement on John Street right now, helping to hold the line, or at the ready, Anne.
Yes.
Should anyone try to break that line.
And frankly, keeping quite a distance, but
right.
They're there. And Craig Kielberger is live with us right now. Craig, exactly where are you and what are you seeing?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Craig, where are you and what are you seeing and hearing right now?
We are at the back of the protest. We're still seeing a number of the labor unions and organizations here that are still struggling to get their message out, despite what we're hearing also coming from the front, which is, of course, members of the Black Bloc and pepper spray being used, and one person who is confronting a lot of the police. And so in the back, you find a mix of the NGOs struggling here to try to get their message out.
So you're saying that somebody has been pepper sprayed?
We have our team members positioned at various points throughout the entire front, and yes, in the front they're saying one man was pepper sprayed and is bleeding on the front, and so you have one message coming from the front lines, and you have another coming from the middle and the back, where you see kind of the split happening between the organizations.
And this
is what groups
you're
like the OFL and CFL, where I'm seeing right here, maintaining peaceful, well, are individuals who are relaying information to us
right. So
at the front are saying it's much more complicated.
And it's kind of word on the street. I mean, obviously, we wait for official word from police and from other, but what you're hearing on the street is that someone may have been pepper sprayed.
I have the EMS update from Katie.
All right.
Yes.
Stephanie, we're hearing you.
Sorry about that, Anne.
That's quite all right. That's live television. What's going on? What have you got?
Katie Simpson was just checking in with EMS about this situation, and here's what they are telling us, if I can just get this up on my screen, that according to EMS, they were called to Queen and John. 3 people involved in this protest have been injured, bleeding from the head. Everyone is conscious and breathing. Yeah, they can't get to the patients, though, Anne, because it's too busy and crowded and clogged on the street. They're having trouble getting to the scene, and reports to them that it is protesters who are injured. They're not saying anything about pepper spray or tear gas or anything like that.
And again,
it's about head injuries.
It seemed to be kind of, Steph, if you will, word on the street that Craig was hearing from the heads of different labor groups and protesters and whatnot. So we have to wait for official word. Stephanie,
but that's EMS, Anne. So
okay.
that's good word with us.
That's good enough for me. Now, let me also ask you this: any word from EMS about how these injuries were sustained?
No. Now they're saying cuts to the head, Anne. You and I witnessed items being hurled in the crowd at the riot police. So I wonder if maybe they just got caught up in that crossfire of items being thrown. I could see flagpoles, and it looked like pop bottles. So
yep,
who knows?
And we will wait to get confirmation from police or EMS to find out more about this. But right now, we can confirm, according to EMS staff, that they've been called to Queen and John with reports that 3 people involved in the protest have been injured, bleeding from the head. Everyone conscious and breathing, but EMS having great difficulty getting to the scene, as there appears to be the protest at a standstill. Let's get another perspective. Our Sue Scambatti on the ground. Sue, what can you tell us?
Richmond Street, where a group of riot squad officers are holding this intersection, a dramatic sight just a few minutes ago. Just right around this corner, we'll let you have a look. A whole team, a small army of riot squad officers from Montreal marched past us here down Richmond, eastbound on Richmond, and turned north onto John Street, where those scuffles were breaking out. You can see that these officers they've been holding this intersection intersection for quite some time. And this is a scene that's taking place at many intersections along Richmond. If I go out and I look down, I can see them there. Some of these officers moved half a block down, and they are on the south side, positioned at Widmer Street to prevent anybody from going south. So certainly the incredible police presence, and it looks like are the officers positioning just northbound there? Perhaps they are just on the edge of our view here.
If I can tell you, yeah, Sue, we're hearing from Lisa LaFlamme at the other end of CTV that there is a face-off right now at Spadina and Richmond where protesters are throwing sticks. So I suspect that's what's got them at the ready now.
And we certainly saw that earlier, both Sue and Stephanie. So it seems that that activity is continuing.
That's right, Anne, and you can see that this is Richmond and Peter, I believe. So just beyond that line is where another incident is happening, beyond those stoplights. So that's where we're seeing the face-off with sticks being thrown, things being hurled, Anne. And what EMS was saying to us, Anne and Sue, is that projectiles were being thrown into the crowd at Queen and John, which we saw, leading to these injuries. 3 people injured, as we've been reporting and confirmed by EMS, with bleeding from the head.
We see fire arriving on scene, and that wider shot, Stephanie and Sue and all of the team, it appears that the numbers have dissipated, but the core group still standing facing police, and those behind this group on the march at a standstill as well.
Well, certainly, and it's pretty clear that police do not want anyone going south to that security fence. That is the wall, basically the wall of riot squad officers lining Richmond Street. They were waiting in the wings, and when we were repositioned from Queen and University and turned down, boy, it was an unbelievable sight. Hundreds, if not, well, I don't know how many, thousands, hundreds at the least of these riot squad officers preparing to come out and hold these intersections to prevent people from going south to the fence. The protesters say they want to get to the fence, that it's a symbolic gesture, that they feel that it's their right, but police don't want that to happen.
And, you know, it's going to be a question of who can outlast the other. If the protesters are determined to get to the fence, police are determined to stop them from getting there. It appears, as we're looking at these live pictures. Farah Nasser, on the inside looking out, what do you see? And I guess, what are you hearing as well?
Take a look at this shot, because you'll only see it here on CP24. You can see the line that police have formed here, and I'll show you also the other police officers when we can pan there. Thank you, Brian. Here we go. Here are the police that we're talking about in an orderly fashion. You can see they have their shields in. Also have EMS with helmets as well in case anybody gets hurt. They're a couple of EMS officers here, but these are police officers. They look like they're from either 2 different units or 2 different cities, police officers, and this is again another shot of the back of the as the Now, we're not seeing a lot of what we saw before. We're not seeing tensions high like we did before. We haven't seen anything being thrown, but you are seeing the aerial shot of that. And
that is our Farah Nasser giving us her perspective. And, you know, you are seeing this for yourself live as it unfolds, Stephanie Smythe. Literally at a standstill. I would like to be able to listen in, because I think what is being said by both the protesters and the police can be very indicative as to what stage we're at right now, Steph.
That's right, Ann. I just want to let everyone know from our CTV's John Musselman, who was out in the scene around King and Peter, he's saying that the mounted unit is now staging at King and Peter, Ann. So they're bringing in the mounted unit. I was surprised we hadn't seen it yet. And now it has been called in. It's near King and Peter to back up the riot police and help I guess, keep control of this crowd along Queen Street, King, and Richmond.
What began as a peaceful protest, we are seeing it changing in a way. It still remains, for all intents and purposes, peaceful, but we have heard of 3 injuries, protesters. We can't exactly confirm yet how they were injured, but we are here bleeding from the head, EMS attempting to get to them. But we're seeing a huge outpouring of police presence now, and a gathering of police at all of the arteries that would be accessed to head south toward the security fence. As the protesters, some of them carrying on and along their route that was to be, others standing at this intersection live right here outside our home at Queen and John, facing police in riot gear.
And the riot gear reinforcements brought in at Queen and John, over at Peter and Richmond. And you can see still a lot of the crowd heading west along Queen. And we're hoping many go north on Spadina, but we're waiting to see more riot gear along this route and down on Richmond, as well as the mounted unit now coming in.
Well, and we know this area like the back of our hand because we live here. This is where we work. And as the protesters head west, there are options of Peter Street as well as Spadina. And, you know, this is a city that is paved to get you everywhere you need to go. And so the police coming together at various intersections along Queen Street to try and dissuade the protesters from heading down toward the security fence.
And so far, Anne, they've been able to hold their ground. We saw that situation right at Queen and John just a short time ago, where the so-called Black Bloc protesters were having a bit of a standoff, and we saw some things hurled at the riot police, and we saw things hurled into the crowd as well. But now there's just a handful of them left from this perspective.
Now, Steph, would you do me a favor? And I think it's really important for everyone watching and listening. This has created traffic jams, and there are transit issues as well. So just in case someone thinks that they're going to be heading out on the TTC, the subway, or they're taking GO Transit, or they're heading down, oh, look at that astonishing shot, Stephanie, of police, and they are on the move, Steph.
That's right. I suspect they're to that King and Richmond area right now.
Can give us a quick overview of how this has impacted movement in and around the city.
Okay, I will. 2 seconds, Anna. We're just learning from CTV's Paul Bliss that Staff Sergeant just told them that police in the line at John and Queen spotted a Molotov cocktail in the crowd. No evidence of that since, but that was spotted. So
that's what we're hearing. All right.
But you were asking about the transit delays.
Quick word.
Still, we have no subway service right now from St. George to Bloor Station. So service is disrupted on the subway line, basically south of Bloor down to Union, both north and southbound. There's no shuttle buses in service right now, and they're not going to go anywhere either.
And GO Transit has issued a statement.
They did, and at the request of police, GO Transit now has all Lakeshore trains terminating at Danforth GO Station on the Lakeshore East Line and at Exhibition GO Station on the Lakeshore West Line. And passengers have the option to go to their respective station outside of the police secured downtown zone. And again, all of this just a temporary measure, and they'll notify of any changes or once it's back online.
Steph, we're seeing so many police, and they've come from across this nation to beef up what we've got here in Toronto, and those shots are astonishing. Let's go live to Farah Nasser. Farah.
And these are the Montreal riot squad
officers. So those were the Montreal. As you saw, we also saw officers from Barrie, but manning the front line is Toronto Police. So that's. Let me show you this again, Russ, if we can go in right over there. And you were saying Paul Bliss saw a Molotov cocktail in the crowd here. I just saw Paul Bliss a few minutes ago, so I think he's talking about this area. Again, this is Toronto Police that are manning this. We're seeing a conversation happening right now. I cannot hear it because I am inside, but something's happening between police officers and the crowd here. So I don't know if anybody can hear it from that aerial shot that we have, but that's what's happening here.
I know, Anne, that the police are likely sounding a warning. That's what we knew the procedure would be with a crowd situation. They could be sounding a warning, and they'll do that several times.
And what we are seeing, Stephanie, more police cars going along Queen West, and it looked like a school bus as well. If we can go back to that, well, I mean, this shot is just incredible. They have been preparing for this, and this is the shot that will be seen around the world, if you will, at this particular moment. And we've got it live right here on CP24, live as it is unfolding. Police forces from across this nation, and they have galvanized, and they are on our streets, and they are taking this very seriously.
You know, and at the same time, while we're watching this shot, I am seeing it come up on Twitter, how people are being so polite in the protest, saying, excuse me, thank you, oh, I'll just move out of the way. So, you know, you have the one shot of the riot police, and there's one of our breaking news vehicles.
And followed by a school bus.
So you have the one shot of the riot police holding the line, and then the perspective from in the crowd of largely very peaceful demonstrators.
And it looks to me at this point, and again, I'm just looking as a viewer right now, and looking from this perspective, it looks as if the crowd has dispersed considerably, but there still seems to be something going on between a line of protesters, a couple of layers, and a line of police on the south part of the intersection Queen and John.
That's right, and things are on the move, and we were hearing from all of our reporters, Lisa LaFlamme, Paul Bliss, John Musselman, who are out there saying that the riot squad, this is from John, was moving west on Richmond to Spadina. So things are just shifting a little bit right now. It's a very fluid situation.
Yes.
And as we can see, the riot police are ready at every intersection right now, trying to protect that perimeter, trying to protect the security zone so nobody is able to push through. And there's Julia Burke.
Yes,
from Newsbury.
It appears that there are quite a few media right there facing facing the riot police, who are shoulder to shoulder. It appears that the movement has continued west, and we're taking a perspective from the top of our building, but so much activity unfolding just in the past 40 minutes live. You've got the best seat in the house. You're watching CP24, you're listening to Radio 1050, and you are as close as you can get without actually being in the thick of that. And this is the safe and the close-up perspective. And you know, we always say, Steph, other stations take the weekend off. We don't.
No.
We are there. We want to give you every perspective of what's happening. This is an important time in the city of Toronto, in the life of the city of Toronto, and history in the making.
And this looks like a great photo op from some of the media there. And,
Does that man
we have
know he's live on TV?
That's right. We have Julia Burke. Hi, Julia.
Oh, we see her. Step in.
Julia, you're there.
Good, thank you. I wasn't sure when to jump in because I can hear you guys. There's so much to talk about here, as you can see in front of me. We're at the corner of Queen and John, right outside the studio. And as you can see, the police dressed in full riot gear have formed a line here, preventing anybody who is considering heading south towards the security zone from doing so. It's peaceful. At this point right now, we have, as you can see, people taking photos, just a lot of observers, people who are curious about what exactly will unfold here today, who come downtown with their cameras, so the casual guy with his camera taking pictures, so they can witness firsthand this summit as it's unfolding. We also have members of media from all around the world who are also watching this as it's unfolding. But I want to tell you, so far, we haven't seen any problems here, although we are hearing through other reporters down the way that there have been some other issues.
Julia, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I ask you, you're seeing it, but what are you hearing? What are protesters saying that have gathered in front of police, and what do police say back to the protesters?
Well, police aren't saying much back to the protesters, although you can see a few smiles and smirks on their faces because they hear what people say, but I don't think that they're allowed to say anything back to them. But we do hear protesters speaking their mind, as they have been throughout the entire procession. We're hearing things like people telling the police, calling them billion-dollar bullies, and shame, shame, shame. We're hearing that a lot. People here, there are no shrinking violets, members of this particular protest, and basically how they feel about the amount of money that's been poured into this security measure. They're basically spewing their opinions at the frontline people here who are responsible for providing security for the G20 summit, and you're looking at them right now. This is what anybody who thinks about going into an area that they're not supposed to be, this is what they're facing. Police officers right now in their full riot gear with their visors down, and as you know, that means that, hey, they're ready to go if anybody wants to get unruly and press the envelope here and try to get past them. But if my cameraman can pan a little bit behind them, I'm not sure if you can see, but it's pretty quiet behind that perimeter. You can see down the street here. We're looking south right now on John. Closer towards where the Metro Convention Center is, and where our leaders, of course, are going to be meeting on later on this afternoon and into tomorrow. So pretty quiet down there. It's quiet beyond this point. Right now, here at this area, the procession for the most part is left, and who remains? If we can pan to the right, we'll show you. Okay, we're going to go down the street and we'll show you that right now it's mostly observers. Not many people here who are taking part in the protest. These are just Torontonians who, like a lot of us, were curious as to what they'd find down here today, and they're just kind of hanging out taking photos.
And a lot of police presence. I know about 15 vans unmarked filled with police officers in the Adelaide and Duncan area right now. And Stephanie, what can you tell us?
We are learning from John Musselman, who is around Richmond and Spadina, that cops are starting to clear all the alleyways in that area for hidden protesters. They're not taking any chance in getting into all the areas where they fear they may be able to hide out for some time. We also know, along with that, a long line of riot police just moved to block off Richmond and Spadina as the crowd was chanting. So the protest, everything is sort of shifting a bit to the west right now, Anne, and we know that the mounted police unit is now involved in this situation as well.
And we are watching. We've seen a massive number of protesters, police saying upwards of 4,000. They went right past our backyard here, a parking lot at 299 Queen Street West, and then there was an issue, and it began at Queen and John, and it remains, but it seems that the majority of the protesters have moved along. But police are not moving at this point. They are certainly sending a message. And as you said, Stephanie, a lot of media from around the world, and this is the picture they're going to get of Toronto at 3:02 on Saturday afternoon, June the 26th. And this, by the way, is right outside our front door, Stephanie. It's all unfolding live here on CP24. Craig Kielberger joins us next. Craig, where are you and what is happening at this point? Craig Kielberger, we just, I think he is repositioning. So once again, these are live shots of what's taking place just outside our front door. Protesters, most of them have moved on. There was a time where tensions ran very high. Police lined facing some protesters. Some had thrown some items that looked as if they were flags and flag poles and some other bits of debris. We are getting word that there are possibly 3 injured from EMS, that protesters, and we're not sure the reason for that, but bleeding, but they're conscious and will be dealt with. Steph, have you got something new for us?
Two seconds.
We've got just a touch of a technical problem here, so we're going to. And now it appears that there is smoke behind.
Okay, and that could be. Not confirmed. That could be just a fire that some protesters have started.
Yep,
could that be tear gas? We don't know.
We don't know, but we do see smoke or something that is clouding the air. We cannot confirm what it is.
It's we're hearing from our John Musselman. It's smoke, which is visible at Spadina and Queen, but he's not confirming if in fact it's from a fire or anything just yet. And we know that the riot police have cordoned off 3 corners of Spadina and Richmond, and now the smoke. Look at people starting to run. And on this area of Queen, I think we're looking west now, aren't we, Anne?
And are they running toward the smoke?
Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Cabins on the ground.
Okay, we're making calls right now, and to the ISU, the Integrated Security Unit, a flare on fire at Spadina and Queen from CTV's Austin Delaney out in the crowd. A flare on fire, according to CTV's Austin Delaney. So, and let's confirm what intersection we're looking at here. I'm trying to get my bearings. Do you think that's
it could possibly be Queen and Spadina?
Yeah, that's Queen and Spadina, where Paul Bliss is sending us a still photo right now of a flare that's just been lobbed. So that is we were looking at Queen and Spadina, where there was a flare and smoke in that area. So from what we're understanding, Anne, right now from our crews all over the downtown area, around this area, it's not tear gas, and it appears to be smoke from a flare.
And again, the protesters, we saw some of them running, and we were trying to confirm whether they were running from or to. It's definitely a flare. We're hearing from Katie Simpson, and Katie is confirming that from Toronto Police, Stephanie?
I believe she confirmed that from Toronto Police with and all our reporters on the ground. And just while this is all going on, we just have learned, Anne, that It is, oh, and Paul Bliss confirming, flare, not gas. Flare, not gas.
And that does he know where it originated? Was it from the protesters?
We don't know that yet, Ann.
Okay.
We have 2 military choppers landing at the convention center right now, Ann.
Okay.
And that would be, of course, some of the G20 leaders.
Yes, and we understood that President Barack Obama landed at Pearson not too long ago. We'll try to get word as to who is in the 2 military choppers that are arriving. There's a lot going on right now. It's a very fluid situation. This is live coverage of the G20 as the leaders arrive, and a major protest overtaking downtown Toronto that has stopped subway service south of Bloor on both the Yonge and University line. Go Transit saying that they are not. Now, we are seeing a police officer putting on his gas mask. Let's go live right now to Nathan Downer on scene. Nathan, what can you tell us?
Hey, yeah, well, just seconds ago, we just noticed riot police putting on their gas masks, and I'm joined by Toronto Police Association President Mike McCormick, who just happened to be walking by on Richmond Street, just south of Queen, where we saw protesters walking through. The gas masks are coming on. What does this tell us, Mike?
Well, it tells us that they're getting prepared. The crowd's dynamics are changing, and the officers are getting prepared for the possible deployment of gas.
How would you assess the situation so far?
So far, the officers are doing a fine job, and the crowd has been, not disruptive or anything, and it just seems there's a little bit of a shift now.
How are the officers themselves doing? Has anyone been hurt?
Nobody's been hurt so far, but as I said, the crowd's been peaceful up to this point, and like I said, what's concerning us right now is there seems to be a change in the dynamic of the crowd.
You've been preparing for this for several months. Are you confident you'll be able to handle whatever comes our way?
Yeah, I'm very confident in the abilities of the Toronto Police Service and all the other police services that are here doing a great job in Toronto. This is like something we've never seen here before, and we have a big concern about some of the groups that infiltrate peaceful protests like the Black Bloc, and we have seen photographic evidence of them infiltrating, and we are concerned about violence.
What's your message to the general public watching at home right now?
That the Toronto Police Service are out here to protect life and property, and we will do our job to ensure that this remains peaceful.
All right, now we're seeing horses coming by as well. What does this mean?
Again, it's just looking at what a change in the dynamic of the crowds, and if the demonstrators are trying to breach any of the lines.
All right, that was Toronto Police Association President Mike McCormick. Thanks for your time, and I'll throw it back to you.
There, Nathan Downer, as Mike McCormick saying, a change in the dynamic in the crowd, and what we're seeing now, the mounted unit on its way, saying very clearly, Nathan Downer, that they're there to do a job, to protect people and property, and it seems as if he also said that they are responding to what is perceived to be this change in the dynamic in the crowd, Nathan.
Was telling me off camera, their role is to ensure that they maintain these lines and that none of the protesters get close to the Metro Convention Center where the G20 leaders are meeting. So that's their role, and that's why the line is so tight where we are.
I want to bring Stephanie Smythe in, who is keeping a very close eye on everything, as we're keeping a very close eye on police presence, the protesters, and all of the various units that are now being deployed, brought in. And Stephanie, we saw a live shot and confirmation from Nathan Downer through Mike McCormick that police some of the units are putting on their gas masks.
Right, and it's amazing to see the mounted unit trotting over toward Spadina and Richmond right now.
And the shields are up, by the way. I just saw the shields go up as well.
Right, so what Mike McCormick was saying, and Nathan got this on the air, it's happening before our eyes, is this mood is changing, it's shifting, and a lot of peaceful protesters staying on Queen Street right now, and that we can still see, and nothing really damaging happening. They're dancing, and they could be chanting, and that's all part of a look. You can see a guitar player there, or is it a trombone?
But it's interesting because Mike was very clear saying that there are certain groups that infiltrate peaceful protest groups, and that's where the problem lies.
And that's what's happening right now.
That's right, and they're anticipating and they're positioning themselves just in case.
That's right, Anna, and I think it's all because things have been so well secured. They're continuing perhaps to move more to the west to see if there's another barrier they can break, the so-called breakaway faction of this group of protesters today. I'm just trying to find out a bit. The police on the horses also putting on their gas masks. That's going to be an interesting ride. But we did see that flare go off, Anne, and we haven't been able to confirm yet who set off the flare, whether the police tossed it into the crowd or whether some protester did it. We saw earlier live here on CP24, and you and I witnessed some protesters lobbing flagpoles into the crowd and toward the riot police, as well as bottles, you name it. And as a result, also, we have confirmation from EMS that 3 people were injured with head cuts to their head and bleeding from the head at that time, a short time ago. So we have a big tuba at Queen and John and some dancers in our neck of the woods, but just a little bit west at Spadina and King.
It's a different story, absolutely. Now, Stephanie, we're watching live pictures of everything that is happening, and that's what we're showing you right now. Information as it comes to us, we will bring it to you live. We are seeing for ourselves, and you're sharing this with us, that the protest appears to be at a standstill in certain spots. I can see, Stephanie, a TTC streetcar in the back as well, and as we know, we've had a shutdown of the subway system south of Bloor, both the Yonge and the University line. And throngs of protesters all over Queen Street West, and a lot of police presence on the arteries that flow south of Queen Street in their effort to stop protesters from moving closer to the security fence.
And we're hearing from CP24's George Lagujanis right now that police aren't allowing any pedestrian or car traffic west of John along Richmond. And we've been able to see that through our eyes. And that scene with the riot police for quite some time, it's been blocked off, Anne, and that's where the mounted unit was trotting along.
Now, Stephanie, it appears to me that some of the movement is coming back toward us. That it seems to be perhaps heading east again on Queen Street.
You know, we'd be able to get maybe if we could take an above look at the scene right now. This is, it's starting to sort of swirl around. The tuba is off to the left now. I can see Anne making way for, okay, that, you see some demonstrators making a run for it, Anne, right now.
And also it looked as if there might have been a bit of, well, people with cameras. You don't know whether they're demonstrators or media, but there is a little bit of running going on. But again, police appear, because of their sheer numbers, they are doing everything they can to keep the peace. And this was touted to be a peaceful protest, but as Mike McCormick mentioned earlier to Nathan Downer, there seemed to be a change in dynamic in the crowd. We're watching, and this is live coverage of a protest that has taken over Queen Street right here in our own backyard at 299 Queen Street West. It's all unfolding live before our very eyes.
And we're learning from one of our producers in the crowd that a police car is getting smashed at Spadina and Queen. So we're just keeping a close eye on this situation, and still in much of this demonstration, and it's very peaceful, but there are some areas where we're seeing some things start to unfold. And also, CTV's Paul Bliss confirming to us that a police car on Queen, just east of Spadina, has been damaged by protesters. Now look at that black group there, that crowd there.
I'm going to try now to bring in Craig Kielberger on the phone, who's been in the middle of many a protest in his young life. Craig, we're seeing cracks in this what was to be peaceful protest. What can you tell us?
They had what appeared to be a pillowcase filled with items they used to smash the windows and jump on top. There were 3 officers, a woman officer, 2 men at the time, visibly shaken when they overran. There was a second police car nearby. The police quickly vacated that second car. The protesters again jumped on top. There was a brief standoff. Then the police decided to no longer continue on that walk. They backed off. The turning point really here, what caused that incident, was the group of the unofficial protesters, the so-called anarchist protesters, had gathered at Queen just in front of Richmond, where there was a standoff with police, where you had about a dozen police on horseback, and the police had been confronted on both sides on Richmond, in fact, by individuals. And the minute that the labor march, the official OFL, CLC, Oxfam march, had cleared the street, the minute they had cleared Queen and continued up Spadina, the street was then vacated, and then the group that had been waiting near the Richmond enclave rushed in. And as they rushed in, it was such a surprise, such a rush of people, literally hundreds running, carrying red flags, and they overwhelmed those two police cars who were not expecting groups to double back on the official route. So they, again, 3 police officers in the car. They were visibly shaken. I could see with my own eyes they were not injured at that point. However, they very quickly left the car that was smashed, the front smashed, the window smashed, and there was a second car that was left undamaged, but they quickly vacated that position. We now see police, again, in full riot gear at a number of intersections, including Queen and Soho.
And I want to bring Stephanie Smythe in now. Steph, we're seeing people running, and there was one fellow who was covering his mouth, his face, as he was running. What can you tell us now about what we're seeing? It's as if there are two very different protests going on.
Right. All we're hearing right now, Anne, from Sue Scambatti out in the field, is that cruisers are now speeding towards Spadina on Richmond with lights and sirens. We don't know, no word of any tear gas being deployed or anything like that.
And could they be responding to a police car damaged?
That's right. I think that, you know, that is not a good sign. And see the officers in tear gas masks right now, keeping an eye on things. Paul Bliss just sent in a still photo to us of a police cruiser that's been damaged. We're going to show that shortly. And here we have one of those patrol cars racing, I believe, along Richmond over to Spadina, or could be on Spadina now, or you know, everything is sort of centered along Queen Street between John and Spadina. And we're looking right now, this shot is looking westbound. And right, see, this is the intersection where...
This is Queen and Spadina, if
the
I'm
Golden
not
Arch is there, Queen and Spadina.
You see it right there. Yes, many a breakfast there. Now, I've got Farah Nasser upstairs on our roof. Farah, what can you tell us? Where are you, by the way, right now? I may have misspoken. Where are you, Farah?
I am right on the ground floor. I am at the same level as the police over here, as you can see. And I have to tell you, we saw cruisers going towards Spadina really fast. But the other thing that I saw that was very interesting, at the exact same moment, all of these police officers put on their masks, to protect them from something. But they definitely got the message at the exact same time, because there was even other police officers that were just here as backup. They weren't forming the line. They on as well. So again, I'm not sure what's happening here. Was some sort of message sent out to all of these police officers here. I'm still on the ground floor, as I mentioned. There's not a lot of protesters that are around the police officers, so there's not a lot of action on that front, but these officers are definitely standing at alert.
All right, you are on the ground. We've got all of our CP24 team on the ground. We've got Nathan Downer out there, Craig Kielberger, Sue Scambatti as well, and Stephanie Smythe. We are watching now a gathering of quite a few people, and Julia Burke might be able to tell us exactly what's going on and where this is taking place. Julia.
Okay. Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're live on CP24, Julia.
Hi. We are at Queen Street, and we actually we started to turn around. The crowd started to turn around on east. As you know, they were progressing west, sorry, on Queen Street, and they started to slowly head east. And hang on, we're going to turn our camera around. And what happened was some people, some of the protesters, not representative of the whole gang, some started taking some of their signs from the protest signs, the sticks, and started smashing one of the police cruisers. At this point in time, we have another development further east here towards the 299 Queen Street building. Further east, we've had another incident where somebody, I'm not sure if they smashed the store. It looks like they have, because another camera crew has come here. Follow me, guys, and bear with us here. My cameraman is slowly moving down the street here, trying to move safely with our security team as well. And, well, we think that somebody's been looting a store. It's hard to tell right now that everything is in flux. But at one point, again, I can tell you that we saw a few people smashing the police cruisers. It set the police into motion. They began chasing those individuals who began running away from the scene. And what that did was kind of spark this outburst of people then basically fleeing the area. My cameraman tripped up. He actually fell trying to get away from the scene. It gets a little bit intense, as you can imagine.
And you've been moving from Peter Street east.
Police asked us to start to move east away from the scene. And right now we're moving east on Queen Street, and we're heading back towards John.
Now, Julia, are police telling the protesters to move east, or are the protesters doing this themselves?
No, you know, that's the thing. I don't think police were necessarily telling them to move back. When the end of the procession stopped at Spadina and Queen, I said to the police, are you going to let them reverse? Okay, hang on a second. And then the police said, no, we're going to let them move back if they want to. It was at that moment that these guys, can you see them right now, dressed in black? The ones that are dressed in black with their faces covered, they're the ones who started to smash the cruiser with sticks.
I believe they're called the Black Bloc. Now, you've been moving from Peter and Queen.
Those are
east,
mailboxes,
and the mailboxes.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. We're east right now. Our camera's trained as the procession is moving east on Queen, and we are moving towards John Street. And as you suggest there, the Black Bloc seem to be the ones that are causing the trouble. One store seems to have been hit, not too much damage, but that's it though. At this part, they seem to be moving through the crowd.
Watch Julia.
And starting little fires in different parts of the crowd, and that is what we were expecting.
It's not us. That's not our truck. That's their truck.
So we are speaking live with Julia Burke on the ground, and Julia, they're heading now. I can see them just as they're starting to come out my window here, where I sit to anchor.
Yeah.
And we're going to see them very shortly. Over my shoulder, if you wish to have a look, there are people ahead of the group that are taking pictures.
I don't know if you can see from your vantage point with the Starbucks there, and where they've smashed the windows at our Starbucks across the street.
Right now we're showing you the line of police who have cordoned off Queen on the north side now. We didn't have this before. Now they're on the north side of Queen.
And here they come. I can see them out my window, the Black Bloc, and they
are... Now we're going to go back towards east. I'm with my cameraman. We're training his camera east now for you, Ann, and we're heading east again. Okay, again, as I'm saying, most people have been very peaceful. Everybody, for the most part, has been peaceful. It seems to be this few, the Black Bloc, inciting the crowd. We've had a number of things thrown at the crowd. My cameraman and I were almost hit by a cell phone, and that's when our security team got us out of the way in time. They don't want to take any chances with us, and they're insisting that we keep moving, and we're quite content to do so, because you just don't know what could happen at any time. You've got to have eyes and ears, eyes in the back of your head around here.
All right, Julia Burke, thank you very much for that. I'm going to throw this back to Stephanie. And Stephanie, what we're seeing now is the movement, a complete reversal of direction, and it's over my shoulder here in our backyard at 299 Queen Street West. It appeared that the leaders of this group of people appeared to be a majority the Black Bloc, just by how they were dressed. And Stephanie, they may have added some other supporters. A lot of the people have sticks in their hands, no flags, very few flags. Some are running, and they are definitely, Stephanie Smythe, they are heading east on Queen Street, back toward University Avenue.
But not before smashing the windows at the Scotiabank there. You can see them in action, hurling chairs, smashing windows, and taking off. The Black Bloc, they wear their ski masks and these helmets and padding over their faces, and Farah Nasser is on the phone now.
So they're hiding their faces as they're doing this kind of damage.
Farah, where are you right now?
I am just at our building on the ground floor. I'm inside, so I'm not in anybody's way, and I don't think that anybody who's marching can actually see me. But we did see how they smashed the window at Starbucks. There was a group of them who were just in front of Starbucks, linking arms. I don't think they were letting anyone who was in that coffee shop out. And then somebody smashed the window and let out a big cheer. The whole group. So it was just as these protesters from the Black Bloc walked by, and that's what we saw happen. Again, we are on the ground floor of this, and it seems to have passed our area, but police in their full riot gear, wearing those masks, they are just right now standing at attention, waiting in case anything else is to happen.
So Farah and Stephanie, here's what we do know now. We understand, Stephanie, that a police cruiser has been damaged. We understand that a Starbucks has had some damage done to the storefront, and now the Scotiabank, which is just about across the street from us, Stephanie.
That's right, Anne, and we're also hearing that at Duncan and King from John Musselman, CTV's John Musselman, protesters are hurling golf balls at Duncan and Queen. Now, you can see that so-called Black Bloc group is heading toward University Avenue. They're staying on the move, but this protest is very split up, Anne, in different areas.
Well, Steph, just over my shoulder once again, we've got the trombone and the people with their cheerleading pom-poms. So it is a very mixed protest, very... Craig Kielberger's on the phone right now for us, Steph, to give us a greater perspective on the ground. Craig, what's happening?
Well, as you reported, the first trigger point was the smashing of a Nike store on Queen Street. Well, we were following the group, and that was the first window that was smashed. Following that, Foot Locker, following that, Starbucks, and then actually, as I don't know if anyone shared that, but your own CP24 building, a large rock was removed from a pillowcase and smashed against it. The group has now continued on Queen Street. We're just passing University. You can see the security guards coming out, standing inside of the storefronts. The building here at Queen and Simcoe, the windows were smashed, obscenity spray painted. They went after the CIBC building. The group is wearing a series of red and black bandanas. A lot of them actually, in you're asking the various causes they represent, again, it's all G20, down with G20, down with capitalism. This is a very different protest when we first started. This is not the initial group that we saw for labor and for unions. They're actually now throwing bottles and turning themselves on a media truck.
Craig Kielberger, it sounds like you're trying to keep up with it, and carry on. We will talk to you in just a moment. Stephanie, I believe we've got Paul Bliss right in the center of things. Paul, what can you tell us?
Okay, I'm at Queen and University, right outside the Four Seasons Center for the Performing Arts. This protest has turned dangerous and ugly. I just watched a number of them trash a Scotiabank front door, front windows, trashed a Starbucks. They saw a CTV van and smashed the windows with rocks. They all stopped in a little subdivision off the side road and loaded their pockets with huge rocks and sticks. And I apologize for breathing heavily, but we've been running a lot to stay out of the range of the rocks. They are now smashing another vehicle. I don't know if you can hear it.
Yes, you can.
It's parked on the side of the road on the north side of Queen. It's a CBC vehicle. It's east of University. So essentially what we have now is a roving pack of black-clad young people, many of whom have donned their bandanas and helmets, and they are looking for targets of opportunity.
How are police responding to this, Paul?
There are no police visible, none. This is completely out of control, uncontained, and the protesters are moving at will through the downtown core, east along Queen Street, destroying pretty much whatever they want. I spoke to one of the activists in a group of people wearing black with red scarves and red flags, and they say they're revolutionaries, and they're here to mark all the revolutions since the beginning of time. And so now we're approaching the Sheridan Center. We're heading east on Queen, approaching Bay. We're just south of City Hall, and there's a black mass of people, all of whom have their faces covered, and every once in a while, they're throwing things. There's some police now. The police have a line south on York Street, but those are the first police we've seen in 2 blocks.
Who do you see as far as police are concerned? What's the number that you're talking about, and what type of unit are you seeing?
Not a lot, maybe 3 dozen. They have clear plastic shields that say police on the front. They have riot helmets on.
We have Wendy Drummond
on, and their batons out. And I am now outside the Sheridan Center, just south of Nathan Phillips Square, and the protesters own the street.
The protesters own the street. Words from Paul Bliss, CTV News. Paul Bliss, you are saying the protesters own the street.
2789, that's your cell.
Stephanie Smythe, I'm going to bring you in, give Paul the chance to continue to catch up to the protesters.
Right.
Steph, he just said the protesters own the street. I asked him where police were. Some have just arrived.
That's where Paul is. And the police did own the street on Queen Street, and you saw in our pictures they're holding secure on John and along Queen in case this crowd turns again and goes back. The question is, are they sending units south of Queen to meet up and hook up at this area on Queen Street near Nathan Phillips Square? This is a live eye shot of ours in that area. The protesters going around this streetcar right now, and that is where this so-called Black Bloc group was headed, and Paul Bliss was watching it happen. A lot of damage in their wake. They are you know, not as much police presence on that side of Queen Anne, and I don't think this is quite anticipated by the integrated security unit. We're trying to get Wendy Drummond or someone from the ISU on the phone here to talk about how they're going to handle this situation. Now, police are mobilizing to control vandalism and violence. That's according to their official ISU tweet, Anne. Police are mobilizing to control vandalism and violence. Looking at the group right now, as you know, they're heading eastbound toward Yonge Street, north of, or just south of Nathan Phillips Square. You have other stores just ahead. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but you know what? Our special correspondent, Craig Kielberger, is with that crowd. Craig, over to you.
We are on Queen Street heading towards Bay. The group is being led by a red flag with the words, "No one is illegal." They're slowing in front of the Sheraton. They're chanting "People Power, People Power." As they're approaching the busy intersection of Bay, there are no police in sight, quite literally at all. There were officers briefly on York who formed a line stopping them from going further south. We are not seeing a similar mobilization on Bay Street. The traffic does appear to have stopped in both directions. The police must be at a higher up point ceasing traffic from the cross streets, but there is no visible police. They have smashed buildings on the way. They have black spray paint that they've been spray painting. As we move ahead, the buildings have started to literally lock up a half a block ahead of us. There's a Starbucks on the corner of Bay and Queen. The police officers, security officers are locking it, and they're forming a line inside. Obviously, officers who have been hired. The same with the TD Bank. The first time we see police officers, is limiting their ability to go down Yonge. So the police officers obviously do have some system of some sort here, because Bay Street is wide open, and the protesters will move down Bay. They're moving down Bay towards Richmond, and they'll be pushing further south, which of course is towards the fence.
And can I just break in here, Anne? We've learned that tear gas has been deployed, and Craig, at 125 Queen Street West, which is near Osgood Hall.
And I believe that's across from the Sheraton Centre.
Right. Which is where we see the crowd right now. So the tear gas has been deployed in that area. And not sure what it's doing to disperse this crowd, Anne.
And Craig Kielberger mentioning that at this point he's not seeing a tremendous amount of police presence, but I also heard from him, Stephanie, that it appears the crowd is beginning to try to move down Bay Street toward Richmond.
That's right. And we're hearing from Paul Bliss as well that they've just trashed the Starbucks at Bay and Queen. And joining us now live on the phone, Anne, is Constable Wendy Drummond with the Integrated Security Unit. Wendy, this is an entirely different picture than when I talked to you about 2 hours ago. Things have taken a turn. Tell us what the ISU is doing now to secure the streets of Toronto.
As you can see, those that were with a very peaceful march have now separated and identified themselves as being violent, and it's not something that we're going to tolerate. We're going to use all of our resources to arrest and charge those who have made this choice of violence. We've seen a great amount of professionalism from our officers and great restraint, and we will continue to show that professionalism. However, we're not going to stand for this type of damage and those who have made the choice to make this violent approach to a protest.
Wendy, they're on, according to all our reporters who are out in the field following these protesters, they are on Queen heading near Bay now. As our Paul Bliss said, protesters own the streets. Please tell us, you've got those reinforcements moving to Bay Street now to get a handle on this.
That's right. We have an enormous amount of resources at our hands, and we will deploy them tactically. This isn't over, and we will continue to enforce safety.
Wendy, what can you tell us about injuries right now? We know Toronto EMS confirmed 3 people injured. We saw from our live shots here at Queen Street and John, protesters hurling flagpoles and objects at the riot police standing there trying to secure the line. What can you tell us about any injuries?
Right. Well, injuries have been a result. It has turned violent, and our officers are going to respond in a measured response to the violence. We've had officers who have been approached. We have damage to buildings, damage to city property. So we have to, that's what we're dealing with, and we're going to continue to deal with this professionally in a measured response.
Okay, I'm looking at the mounted unit now, and right now, or rather, Wendy, I believe they're heading along Richmond Street, at least toward the other side of Yonge Street. We're also hearing that they're turning south on Bay at Queen, but that they've also been smashing some windows at the Bay near Queen and Bay. So these officers aren't in a trot or a canter for that matter. They're holding firm, but are more mounted units going to be getting over to this area?
Absolutely. Our resources are spread out throughout the city to respond to a number of different locations when needed, and that's what you're seeing right now. It's very fluid, and we're responding where needed.
Wendy, did you ever anticipate this? I know you prepare for eventualities, but I mean, with the billions spent in security, we are still seeing damage, and as our Paul Bliss said, protesters owning the streets.
Well, yes, we do. This is what we have been preparing for, and there's been some criticism as to the amount of police that we've seen on our streets. And this is what we're prepared for. This is why we have the numbers we have down there. It is to maintain public safety, and that's our mandate.
Okay, Wendy Drummond, we're going to continue to check back with you. Anne, was there anything you wanted to add or ask Wendy as we watch the situation unfold here and our crews out in the field? And by the way, Wendy, it's not just property like Starbucks and stores. There's also police cruisers that have been damaged and media trucks, one of our own included. That's right. As you can see, the violence, there's no respect for anybody's property or personal safety at this point, and that's why our officers are going to be there to deal with those people that have made these choices. What about the peaceful protesters? What do you tell them right now? If you happen to find yourself in and amongst this crowd, please separate yourself. There are other peaceful protests going on throughout the city. We do have our designated speech area that was created for this, for people to have their say peacefully, and we ask that you separate yourselves from this area. We don't want anybody to get injured.
And Wendy, I'm just going to ask a quick question of Wendy. What do you say to people hearing that about a block ahead of where the protesters have broken away, people are beginning to close up shop? What do you say to businesses and to people who are in the area?
People need to do what they need to do to protect their property. As we can see, there's no care and there's wanton disregard for anybody's property. So if you can maintain your property safely, then do so.
What about that sound cannon, Wendy? Is that going to be pulled into play at all here? Is that under consideration just yet?
Well, again, the LRAD is a communications tool that we have, and it's always available to us. It will be deployed if necessary. Okay, Constable Wendy Drummond with the G20 Integrated Security Unit. Thanks for that update, Wendy. We'll check back with you. Thank you.
And as you look at our headlines, Stephanie Smythe, our breaking news, protesters causing some damage along Queen Street, and apparently now they're starting to make their way down Bay. And as Wendy Drummond, Stephanie, is saying, they appear to have no regard for the law or for people or for people's property. And they have broken away, and the peaceful protesters have broken away from this group. I don't know whether we're able to confirm whether they are the Black Bloc, but certainly they have wreaked havoc on Queen Street, and police are now making their determination as to how to best and safely contain this situation, Stephanie.
And you can see that they're blocking. This is a shot right now, a live shot. On Queen Street, I believe, Anne, and they're holding the line at University still and making sure that nothing, there's another one of our camera shots looking down at Queen and University and holding that line on Queen Street so no more protesters head eastbound where that other group is. And these riot police now walking, I believe, on Richmond Street, and our special correspondent joins us now live again on the phone. Craig Kielberger, what can you tell us, Craig?
I'm at King and Bay, which is the exact tip of the protest. There were 4 police cruisers stopped to try to, I don't know what they were thinking, frankly. They've now overwhelmed those police cruisers. They're jumping on them and smashing the windows. The police originally had a line of only 12.5 on the south side of King. Those police, by sheer numbers, very quickly backed away. The police are watching on the side of Bay. For those of you who are familiar with this corner, this is where Bank of Montreal is located. This is where the old Toronto stock exchange, TD Exchange is located. They're throwing various items, such as golf balls and whatnot, at the police who are here. The police do have items in their hands. They have large batons, which they are using to try to contain the situation as best as they can. They're now moving people away from the buildings, away from the glass, because they're now throwing at the glass and the shattering of the glass at the CIBC building that's taking place here. The group has temporarily stopped at the corner of King, and no, they've pushed through the police. They're continuing further south. They're going further south on Bay. The police have just gone to the sides.
Now, and, Craig, police are trying to contain the situation. Are they being aggressive, in your estimation, in trying to shut this down and make arrests?
No. The police are not trying to shut this down. Okay. There are simply too many protesters. Looking on both sides here, I see maybe a total of 30, maybe 40 officers. There are more cruisers pulling up. Cruisers have tried to create a line on King, and the individuals are now running back towards that line. Initially the group was running south on Bay past King, and then for an unknown reason, about 200-300 of them stopped, and they've come together. They're now converged at this very corner. The police are now forming a line on Bay, and they're forming a line to contain them in this very street corner. Now, is it fair to... They've locked them in on 2-3 sides now.
All right, so they still have a fourth side.
And they're now chanting and throwing things at the BMO, but the crowd, this crowd portion of the protest is no longer moving.
Craig,
that being said, they're not under control by any stretch of the mind.
Craig, are they able to fully contain in that fourth side would be closed up by a line of police officers?
It's a very thin line. There's literally one line. They formed what looks like a pyramid structure. No one behind them. They're receiving various items thrown at them, particularly golf balls. They've all brought out these batons in their hands. They have hands on one hand to their shoulders, pointing at when an item is thrown at them so others can move out of the way. These are not riot gear police officers, though. They do not have shields. They mostly have short sleeves. They are not prepared for a gathering of this size. And this gathering has completely smashed 2 police cars and written various obscene messages on it. But the police themselves are standing their ground, even though there are literally on the corner of Bay and King perhaps 30 of them at most.
30 police officers. Can you give us a number of protesters that they are there?
7, maybe 750.
And at this point,
they're severely outnumbered. There's 3 cruisers that have pulled up. A 4th and a 5th now have pulled up. And there are other police cars that were here previously that were destroyed. Other officers are just arriving now on the west side. There's an additional 25 officers getting out of Chevy silver vans. These are not police cruisers. They are not near the point of confrontation. They're standing back. Again, they're not in riot gear. They have their helmets down, but short sleeves. They're not with shields, not in the riot gear as we saw. There's no cavalry. No tear gas in this section have been used. And the attempt, it appears, is to limit the protesters from going east on King. But there's no attempt to move a north-south motion on Bay Street.
Well done, Craig Heelberger. Thank you. We'll get back to you soon. Stephanie Smythe, what have you got?
Well, Anne, we're continuing to watch this protest on Bay Street. We're hearing that it's going down and they're coming back up again, and it seems to have no particular flow. But we are learning that Toronto Police, as Wendy Drummond told me minutes ago, they're going to be sending in reinforcements to try to secure this situation. There's been a lot of damage, Anne, as we've witnessed, to buildings, to stores on Queen Street. We saw a lot of mailboxes overturned. And we're going to go live now to CTV's Michelle Dubé, who is near Bay in front. And Michelle, what can you tell us from your vantage point at Front and Bay?
Well, we're looking north on Bay, and you can definitely see that the protesters are making their way south. They're getting very close to the fence here at Front and Bay, which is close to the Royal York, where the leaders are going to be gathering this evening with their spouses. Police have actually closed the gate, so no one's able to get through at this point, and they've put their helmets on in anticipation. The crowd is definitely moving south. They've passed King, and they're making their way south. It's not clear. I'm just trying. It's kind of crazy here. We're trying to figure out exactly what they're going to do. But obviously, from what you guys are talking about and hearing, it's getting violent. Mailboxes overturned. A CTV van was damaged, as well as a CBC van. Obviously, the Starbucks windows were smashed. And police do not want this crowd to get to this fence, but they're coming close. So the question is, obviously, what happens next at this point? You know that police are not going to want them to get this close to the fence.
Michelle, how close are they at this point?
Okay, they're coming up. They've just passed the front of the protesters. They've just passed King. They're getting close to Bay and Wellington Street. I'm just looking through the lens of the camera. They sort of seem stalled at this point. I'm not sure what their next move is, but we did see the police cars come into the intersection of Bay and Front, sort of anticipating them arriving. But it's anybody's guess at this point what their next move is. But we can guarantee that police officers do not want them coming this close.
Michelle, there's been violence along the way. Are you hearing or seeing that as they make their way, they're trying to make their way toward an area that police do not want them in, the security fence?
From my vantage point, I'm not seeing any violence, but definitely we're hearing about it. And what's interesting is a lot of people in the streets of Toronto, most people are staying away from the downtown, but there are a lot of pedestrians who are stopped just sort of watching in awe of this crowd coming towards us. People are taking out their cameras. We had to quickly grab our gear and move off the road because we thought, hey, they're coming pretty fast. And a few of the pedestrians were like, why are you moving so fast? And we said, listen, it's, okay. What we're seeing right now is we've got a line of police officers in tactical gear. They're trying to head them off at Bay and Wellington. It's clear that they do not want them to be any further south. So police are rushing in, lines of 3-4 officers trying to stop them from coming any further south.
Now, are they right across Wellington as they are coming together?
They haven't reached Wellington yet, but it looks like police do not want them to get to, oh my gosh, there's a fire that started. Can you see that in our tent? Yeah. It looks like a fire has started in the area of Bay and King. I'm not sure exactly what is on fire, but we can see from Bay and Front that...
It's a police car.
We can see from Bay and Front
it's a police car on fire. We've got a picture here from
Stephanie
CTV's Paul
Smythe, what
Bliss.
can you tell us?
We've got a police car on fire at Bay and King. We've just got a still photo, and we're going to process this for you as quickly as possible. This is a Toronto police car that is on fire right now, and this is, we're also learning, it's smoke and fire also at Bay and Adelaide. So Paul Bliss just sent in a police car burning. We're going to show you that picture in a minute. So that's what the smoke is coming from. Earlier we saw smoke, and that was from a flare over on Queen near Spadina. These are incredible pictures we're going to show you in a second, being emailed to us from CTV's Paul Bliss. And we are also learning now that the Sheridan Centre is in lockdown, obviously, with this situation. So they're not stopping at anything. As Wendy Drummond was saying, and that this crowd there you go. Live on CP24, you're watching Toronto police cruiser on fire, set on fire by militant protesters at Bay and King in the financial district of Toronto. And protesters setting this car on fire, as we suspected, trying to head toward the security fence that is protecting the International Broadcast Centre and all the areas involved with the G20 that is getting underway here in Toronto.
Speeches are being made as we speak, and Stephanie, fire crews are going to have to respond to this as quickly as they can, and it's a massive crowd that they're going to have to get through. Obviously, we need to find out about injuries. There's an awful lot of people there. We're seeing some of that, an attempt to put that fire out. It is Craig Heelberger near the Craig, what can you tell us right now?
I'm at the corner of Bay and Wellington. The police have just formed a line with 100 officers. 2 Greyhound buses arrived. They dropped off officers in full riot gear. They do have arms in their hands. They do have tear gas masks on. They do have tear gas, the items that used to deploy the tear gas. The car is in a full blaze, a little bit ahead of us. It formed a full line, 2 line deep, and they're moving us and moving everyone further back, as you can probably hear. There's officers in bicycles who are at the fence located at Wellington and Bay. The flames are very large. They're very pronounced. The group is around the flaming car. The officers have held the line. They haven't advanced, but neither have the protesters advanced towards them. There is at the moment a standoff with additional officers being held in reserve. They're now pushing us and pushing everyone back as they're clearing away journalists, pedestrians, anyone within this area for their next action.
And Craig, we just saw something, perhaps it was a flare or there was some light sort of breaking up. Can you tell us what you saw?
Unfortunately, I can't. At that point, an officer actually physically grabbed me to remove me from that area as he was pushing, for their own public safety, pushing individuals back away from the area where the police were being deployed. We're now going around the side to get a better look. The officers, though, are still very few in number compared to the number of protesters. There are maybe 100 in total, the majority behind the fence without full riot gear, maybe 40, 45 who are formed a line on Bay Street near Bay and Wellington, and those are in full riot gear, gas masks, weapons in hand, and gas. What would appear to be the items that one uses to deploy gas canisters. I have seen them before, so I'm very confident that that's what they are.
And the concern about the safety,
helicopters overhead.
And the concern about the safety of this burning vehicle, which has fuel on board.
The vehicle is in full blaze. It is a police cruiser. I don't know anything else besides that. The group is around it. They had previously spray painted it, previously jumped on it, previously smashed the windows of it. And then an incendiary device was used in order to light it.
Yeah, and it appears people running, but also police really standing back. I mean, obviously, again, the concern that there's a gas tank in a car, and so we're watching this. Stephanie Smythe, if you can add to what Craig has been talking about.
We're hearing, Anne, that from CTV's Paul Bliss, who's in the area, that there are small explosions coming from that car. The worries about the gas. Look at that, and it's still raging out of control. Small explosions from this burning police car at Bay and King. Protesters running all around it. The riot police trying to keep control, but it continues to burn, incredibly. Okay, CTV's Austin Delaney is now joining us live from that area. Austin, are you safe? I mean, this is it's a little bit out of control here, and can you hear me, Austin?
Yeah, I hear you just fine. Yeah, I'm safe. I'm at King and I think it's King and Bay, and there's a police car on fire. I guess you're seeing that as well, right at the intersection, and just a whole bunch of these black suited guys just running by, screaming by, running and smiling and laughing and making a mockery out of it.
What about the crowd? We got our vantage point right now. The flames are spectacular. What are the numbers of the crowd here that you can tell? We can see lots of people milling around, lots of people taking pictures, and people running. What about this protest group that is causing this trouble?
It is that one group that's running. They just ran from the scene. They're running east now along King Street. Sorry, I'm out of breath. I had to run myself. So most of them are just running that way, and that's where this group passes by. That's how the problems begin.
All right, Austin Delaney, we have to interrupt for just a moment. Thank you, Austin, and please stay safe. We've got George Lagajanis on the ground, as close as he can safely get. What can you tell us, George?
Thanks very much, Ann. We are parked currently at the intersection of Temperance and Bay Street. Let me zoom in for you, show you these dramatic pictures of a police car that's been burning now for about 15 minutes. Now, the last word we got on the Black Bloc crowd is that they're actually moving east on King towards Yonge, but this is what they've left behind. About 5 minutes ago, when I first arrived on scene with this breaking news vehicle, as soon as I got to the vehicle, a huge sea of humanity started rushing north towards us. We weren't sure exactly what was happening, whether or not the police line was being extended or any other police were being deployed on some other level, whether it was mounted or what. But as you can see, this is what this protest has turned into today. Something very dramatic, something police were hoping wouldn't happen. And let me just tilt up for you again. Pardon the camera work. It's kind of a madhouse in here. Let me zoom it out a bit for you and show you the level of these pictures.
George,
this
safety
is serious stuff.
It is serious stuff. Safety first. Again, tell me the position of the protesters who did this and the position of police right now. And you've seen an awful lot of people standing and looking, and there's great concern about a burning vehicle and the proximity to it.
Well, they've been moving very quickly. I mean, they did a double back from our station along Queen, and then decided to try and breach the police line that was basically extended all along Queen, and they did that. They finally found a few spots to come down, one of them being a major street, Bay Street. I'm thinking the police were hoping they could allow them down Bay and then maybe reroute them back east or west and not get close to the fence. I cannot tell you from this vantage point where the actual protest crowd goes from there, but I can see a line of police that's keeping people at least back from this burning vehicle. Of course, they said all along, the anarchist groups, one of which being SOAR, the Southern Ontario Anarchist Resistance, they said their goal today was to get down to that fence and to confront. Confrontation was welcome, the media wasn't, and obviously, as you can see by these pictures, the police were not welcome in their mix either, and the vehicle continues to burn. Right now, it looks like there's a few scattered protesters running through and close to that vehicle, but police seem to have a handle on that. There seems to be more people interested in taking pictures of this protest area versus trying to continue any further south. But I can tell you the goal of police here is to not allow anybody close to either of the gates, the Wellington Gate, which is the access gate, the controlled access, or then, of course, the Front Street gates, which is the no access zone close to the convention center.
George, does there appear to be any effort on the police part? I mean, they're making their judgment calls as they do this to try and apprehend those who have caused this damage and arrest them?
Well, I have seen some evidence of that, and when I was back near the station around Richmond and John earlier, making my way east towards this crowd, police were stopping many people on the streets, including myself, and checking our bags and making sure that we had nothing incendiary or anything that was going to add to this kind of a situation. But they were, for the most part, being calm, taking orders on their headsets, donning the gas masks when ordered to, releasing them when ordered to, moving very quickly and in uniformed groups when told to. But from my vantage point, all I can see right now are flames. I can't tell you where this crowd of protesters has gone, at least the more radical ones. But right now it seems to be more of an observation from onlookers than a strong protest. Most of the people you can see in front of that burning car, now we're here to look at that, and they aren't really part of any moving protest.
And such a basic question, any sign of fire to try and put this out?
No, right now that's a very good question, and there is no sign of any Toronto Fire Services vehicles.
We were calling Toronto Fire, Ann and George, and Katie was talking to them.
Oh, we got an update.
And we have an update, 2 seconds. Toronto Fire, they have people inside the perimeter that are taking care of the situation, they say. It looks like they're letting it burn out. Toronto Fire does not head out on their own in this situation. They have a crew that is working with the ISU that is dealing with this. They're going to call us back very shortly to confirm any injuries or anything.
Only 3 injuries so far, just checked.
Right, okay, so right now we just have those 3 injuries, Ann and George, that we were telling you about from earlier this afternoon. Now, Craig Kielberger, our special correspondent, is out there. Craig, I know we have the mounted unit on way to that scene. I don't know if you're seeing it or not, but a source of mine.
The mounted unit is there.
Okay.
There are, by my count, looks approximately a dozen officers. There are also another 100 who have just marched in, coming from York Street across. I overheard the conversation about firefighters among the ISU. Those officers, 6 of them had on their back fire extinguishing equipment, so what you would say is a fire canister. They were under, those officers were not carrying full riot gear, but were fully geared up. The officers around them had full riot gear, including shields. They're now securing the perimeter around that burning car. It's interesting to note that the officers have the plastic that are used to arrest people and to hold and bound their arms together. They're all outfitted with a very bright, very colorful, easily identifiable restraints on their hip. So you now have that corner with more than 100 officers, full riot gear. And they do have fire extinguishers, although they're still within a few feet. They haven't actually reached the car yet. They're still almost there and haven't started putting out the flames. So the flames are billowing, large black clouds wafering up on top of the TD Bank and on top of the BMO.
Craig, I guess the question is, where are the protesters now, and where are they headed?
Well, it appears the police created a box on 3 sides by the corner of Bay and Wellington, and on the other side of Bay, so you could not exit near that fence. So the vast majority of the protesters did not succeed in crossing Wellington Street. They're still north of Wellington near the Queen's Park area. Where they're proceeding from there on this side, I'm unaware. Though the police are now fully surrounded all four sides of that burning car, and looks like they're about to start that process to put out that flame, although it is still very large. They now also
we see police on the move.
Units are now moving.
Yes.
They were held in the side, and they are now surrounding the car also on all four sides with the mounted units.
I want to bring George Lagajanis on the phone in. George, what more can you tell us? George Lagajanis is on the ground. George?
Ann, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hello? Okay.
Hello, we are live.
Okay, as we speak, the rain's really starting to come down now. I don't know if you can tell, but just seconds before we went live, the crowd started storming towards our vehicle once again for the second time. It's because there are the occasional rabble-rousers within this protest on our side of the vehicle that are throwing some sort of canisters at the police. When that happens, the police make a strong move with shields, and then en masse, hundreds and hundreds of people start streaming towards our vehicle. Then we shut the doors and run along with them. But now we're back at the vehicle. Everything seems to be okay right now. You know, a word that comes to mind is epiphenomenal. There's really no direct target here. This crowd seems to be circling back. Some people with that distinctive black clothing coming in amongst all these people, most of whom you see with umbrellas or cameras, that are really just trying to take this in almost on a tourist level. Seeing this, which is a strange sight in the downtown core of Toronto, something burning at will like this, and then the occasional rabble-rouser comes in, throws something, and then everything moves quickly towards us. These people, they obviously feel that they're not subject to risk as much as we feel we are here, but we've been told from the beginning that this group, at least on their website, said confrontation was welcome. The media is not, and that's certainly evidenced today by the fact that a couple of media vehicles were damaged, as well as the police. And I'm going to keep this picture alive and send it back to you right now.
All right, and just a reminder, please send us pictures, My Breaking News. We want to see what you're seeing. And Stephanie Smythe, you've got Wendy Drummond on the phone. What does she have to say, Steph?
Well, Wendy, let's go live to you right now. We're looking still at this police car burning. Tell us the latest on the ISU security force that is in effect now and how you are working to contain this faction of protesters.
We'll continue to monitor and put our officers where they're most needed. As you can see, we're going to continue to be provocative by these people, but we're going to maintain our professionalism and continue in a manner which is balanced. It's not something that we're going to tolerate. This violence, somebody's going to get seriously injured. We have had people with injuries right now. However, nothing serious. None of our officers have been injured, thankfully. But again, we're asking that if you're not a part of this, if you want no part of the violence, please don't come down to this area.
Wendy, we're learning now that 2 police cars are now on fire at King and Bay. That's 2 police cars. We see a fire truck pulling up now. It doesn't seem to be under control by any stretch. How can you take back this section of our city?
Well, essentially, I'm watching it unfold as you are. It's very fluid. It's very ongoing. But we do have resources that we're able to deploy where we need them.
What can you tell us about any protesters? We heard reports that they were getting down toward the security fence. Do you have confirmation of that?
Our fence has not been compromised. We have many officers down there, and that's something we're going to maintain.
Okay. Do you have tear gas and LRD at the ready then?
Tear gas has not been deployed.
Okay, because we had reports that tear gas had been deployed. So you're saying officially that there's been no tear gas deployed by Toronto police during this protest?
As of my last update, no, we have not deployed tear gas.
Okay, so the line is still secure. That security perimeter around the G20 area is still secure.
It is.
Okay, Wendy Drummond, we'll check back with you in a little bit to find out more. And in the meantime, we're continuing to watch this breaking news. We've got reports now, and that 2 police cars are on fire. And if I may just say, we were speaking with Toronto Fire, and Stefan Powell was saying to us there could be toxic smoke and stuff from the gasoline and tires.
Yeah,
but
I
black
guess
rubber is burning from the tires. He says that could be toxic. Now, it's unlikely to explode.
That's the good news.
It is 2 fires that we're looking at. 2 separate police cars on fire.
Incredible.
car unlikely to explode, and the tires might explode.
But the toxicity of that has to be of great concern to anybody inhaling this and anybody nearby. Thankfully, it is raining. That's going to help to at least ease the fire a little bit. There is that question, and you asked it very clearly of Wendy Drummond of Toronto Police. How are police going to get this part of the city back? How are they going to prevent these unruly protesters? Look at this shot that we got between the two buildings of business and finance in the King and Bay area, and you see the vehicle on fire, it is a second vehicle now, we are confirming through Toronto Police, has been set on fire, and it is burning away at King and Bay, and the protesters are making their moves. And Stephanie Smythe, we have been asking that question, how police are going to be able to contain this situation. And fire has finally arrived on scene to put the final touches on 2 vehicles burning now, Stephanie.
That's right, and we've got that from CTV's Austin Delaney at the scene as well. But we're seeing on Twitter, Anne, that from the protesters are saying, March meeting up with us at Adelaide and Yonge. Come, come, we need you. This is from some Black Bloc gathering at Adelaide and Yonge. Could that be the next destination for the protesters? We don't know. Look at that. Did you see that?
Now, that appeared to be a fireball. And again, we don't want to use the word explosion. And we heard from Stephen Powell, Toronto Fire, that the car is unlikely to explode. But I'm no car expert, but there are tires and there is gasoline in a fueled vehicle. Toronto Fire has just started to try to put that out.
Now, and George Lagujanis is at the scene there. Let's go to him live now. George, what can you tell us? George, are you able to hear us?
Yes.
What's the latest from your vantage point?
Oh, hi, Stephanie. Are we live right now?
We are live.
Pardon me, I was just adjusting something. As you can see now, Toronto Fire, as you said, arrived on scene, and that first police vehicle that was on fire, now we can see more of it. It's the white smoke. That vehicle has burned through. The second vehicle, I'm assuming, is just a little bit to the west of the intersection there on King, just a little bit west of Bay Street here. A second fire. Don't know exactly how that started, but Toronto Fire Services crews were able to come from the south because they were deployed from the security zone. Yeah, been quite a scene out here. I'll tell you something. These crowds today were originally coming out discussing that they were going to protest for human rights and moral hazard versus the fiscal belt tightening and all the sort of economic agendas that were on the plate for G20, and things turned ugly. Police were prepared for it, but I don't think everyone else out here was.
George, are you able to adjust the camera to widen out a bit so that we can see?
Yes, I can, absolutely. I'm just going to come back in the truck.
And Stephanie, I've just been handed a note that the Eaton Centre is in lockdown. Can you confirm that?
Well, we are working to call the Eaton Centre, but yeah, we're hearing reports it's gone into lockdown. But
and
we will
the Sheraton Centre as well is in lockdown. We can confirm that.
Yes.
There's no subway service, University or Yonge line south of Bloor at this point. So we are, thank you, George, for widening out just a little bit to see, you know, people on the fray standing and watching. Some actually going toward the fires. And now we're going to go back in for the close-up shot because it gives us a better vantage point. And as I say, I mean, this is a protest turned ugly and violent. 2 police cars have been set on fire. Store windows have been smashed. We understand 3 people have been injured. We can't give you any more details at this point. We are hearing of some lockdowns. For instance, the Sheraton Centre, and Stephanie is going to confirm.
It's confirmed, Anne.
It is confirmed that the Eaton Centre is now in lockdown.
Eaton Centre in lockdown, Anne, and what we're all wondering is what is happening next with these protesters and where they're gathering, if this is the worst of it. But also, Anne, when I was speaking to Wendy Drummond a minute ago, I just want to reiterate, Toronto Police have not fired any tear gas. No tear gas has been fired throughout this demonstration yet. And may never be, but right now they're saying no tear gas fired. There is the LRD that they've got in their arsenal as well, but they're hesitant to use that.
You're watching Toronto's breaking news, CP24. It is 4:08 on Saturday, June the 26th. The G20 leaders are arriving and have arrived in Toronto. So has a violent protest. It began early this afternoon at 1 o'clock in a very peaceful manner, and then things turned ugly. We now have Stephanie Smythe back with us, and we've seen scenes of violence and police cars smashed and set on fire. We're now live at King and Bay, where we see the aftermath, Stephanie, of 2 police vehicles on fire. The big question is, where are the protesters headed next? The educated guess is, from what we've been hearing, that they're making their way toward the security fence, but there are many ways to get there in a city the size of Toronto. And also, where are police and how are they going to be able to contain the situation and deal with this protest that began peacefully and has turned violent and ugly, Steph?
That's right, Anne, and I just want to let everybody know, while we're watching this situation unfold in downtown Toronto, this is having a very wide impact on services in and around Toronto and the GTA. Just to let everybody know, there is still no subway service from Bloor down to Union in both directions. That's both on the Yonge and the University subway lines, and still no TTC subway service from Bloor down to Union Station. This was in their plan if things got out of hand, and that is what is still in effect on the TTC. With GO, we have another situation in effect, and this is at the request of police. GO Transit has all Lakeshore Line trains terminating at the Danforth GO station on the Lakeshore East Line and the Exhibition GO station on the Lakeshore West Line. Passengers have the option to go back to the respective station outside of the secured downtown zone. And again, Anne, this is a temporary measure, and they say that they will notify of any changes. But still in effect, Anne, for the past about 2 hours now, almost 2 hours, this GO train situation and the TTC situation in and around downtown Toronto, anywhere south of Bloor. We do not have any shuttle buses being deployed on the Yonge or the University line. They've not decided to do that. They're just shutting it down and keeping the area secure. So we're continuing to watch all of the fallout in the local vicinity, and we're going to have, Anne, hopefully Mayor David Miller on the phone very shortly to discuss what is going on in his city right now, something that I know the security forces were gearing up for, but none of us probably imagined that they could get to this extent where we see police cars burning in the streets, we see windows smashed in stores and coffee shops and banks. We see mailboxes overturned, and you and I witnessed right here at Queen and John things being hurled at police by protesters. And again, just one breakaway faction. It is believed to be the Black Bloc group that has broken away from what was a very peaceful demonstration. And we're looking at live pictures now of the Starbucks where some of the damage was seen. Anne, over to you.
All right, thank you. We have Mayor David Miller on the phone. Mayor Miller, thank you for joining us. How do you respond to the pictures that you're seeing and the information you are receiving?
Well, first of all, Chief Blair has kept me very closely briefed, and this isn't our Toronto. And my response is anger. You know, we have thousands of people peaceably asserting their democratic right to speak up, and a relatively small group, probably a few hundred, mostly people who seem to be not from Toronto, come here to, on all evidence, commit deliberate acts of violence. I think every Torontonian should be outraged by that. You know, we're a city where people protest all the time, and we never have incidents like this, and I don't believe there's any explanation for it at all other than that people came here deliberately to commit this kind of act.
I know that you stay in very close touch with Chief Bill Blair, and police have been training for this and have been working hard, preparing for this day as we're watching, and I know you're watching CP24 as well. You can see police in riot gear. They are running now at the King and Bay area. How does a situation like this become contained?
Well, I mean, the police have the appropriate strategies and tactics, and they're very significant resources. I mean, the challenge they face, though, I think everybody can understand when there's a small group of people who clearly are attempting to be malevolent. It's difficult to control, and I've got absolute confidence in Chief Blair. I think everything that possibly can be done will be to ensure that the situation is under control, and he just advised me that the police will be moving strongly against this particular part of the protest group. But I do want to say one thing. If people have listened carefully to what Chief Blair has been saying for the past 10 days or so, he's been saying that the police and the security will accommodate people's lawful right to protest, but he has also, in every time he's spoken publicly, he has expressed some concern about people who would deliberately commit unlawful acts. And he was speaking exactly of this kind of group. I think Torontonians should be very angry with people who would come to, burn cars and break windows right in the neighborhood of CP24, as you know, to make, I don't know what kind of statement they're making by that, except one about themselves.
Mayor Miller, we have a huge police presence in our city, and the protest went from peaceful to downright ugly. There are some, and I'm receiving emails from people saying, why haven't these people been apprehended?
Well, I mean, I think people need to step back a moment and be calm. And I urge Torontonians to be calm. There's a very small group of people, perhaps a few hundred at the most, who, on all evidence, I think the only fair way to describe it, have deliberately come here to commit violent acts. That's unacceptable to us. It's unacceptable to the police. And I can assure Torontonians, and I'm sure Chief Blair will assure them, that every effort has been made to apprehend people who do these acts. That's why the police presence is here, and that's why there was concern about security, not because of people protesting. People are welcome to express their opinions in Toronto, but because of the small group of people that we've seen on CP24 very clearly choose to do this. And it's not a choice we want, and it's an illegal choice, and they are criminals, and the police will make every effort to apprehend them.
Mayor Miller, the world is watching us right now. What do you have to say about your city, our city, Toronto, at this very moment?
Well, my message is to Torontonians, and I think people, first of all, if you are in the vicinity of Queen or King, I ask you to leave and go to a different part of the city. At the moment, it's not a place that you should be. Secondly, these pictures, when you're sitting in my seat, it's not what you ever want to see in this city. And the people who have committed these acts aren't welcome here. And I'm fully supportive of Chief Blair's efforts to ensure they're apprehended.
What do you say to the citizens of Toronto right now?
I just said it.
All right, what do you say to reassure them?
I just said that. To Torontonians, just ask people, stay calm. There's a very significant police presence downtown. They will apprehend the people who deliberately came here to do these kind of violent acts. Not acceptable to us, and we're used to protests in Toronto. Protests don't occur like this.
Mayor David Miller, thank you for taking the time to speak with us, and I know an awful lot of people are watching and listening right now on CP24.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Thank you. We'll speak with you again soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. It is 4:16. This is Toronto's breaking news, CP24. Mayor David Miller, in no uncertain terms, saying that this is a handful of breakaway protesters, that this does not represent the